Bill Anderson has been the picture of ease in country music for more than 60 years. He wrote some of the most classic country songs, performed on the Grand Ole Opry stage longer than almost anyone else, and won the respect of both fans and fellow artists. He was known as Whisperin' Bill because of the soft, almost conversational way he sang. He smiled during interviews and autographed so many books that his hand hurt. He made the Opry feel like home for many newbies, but now, at age 87, the man who made a name for himself by being kind and calm has finally told the truth. 8 grand old Opry acts that he just couldn't stand. These weren't short-lived dislikes or arguments. For decades, he held grudges against people who had hurt him, betrayed him, or made him feel bad about himself. People never saw what went on behind the scenes at the Opry, where tempers flared, friendships fell apart, and names were made or lost in whispers and shadows. And when Bill finally named people, it sent shockwaves through Nashville's close-knit music community. Fans who thought they knew how family-friendly the Opry was had to be surprised. What did that curtain really hide? The room went quiet when Bill Anderson started to confess. No one knew if he was going to give hints or say the names out loud. Bill didn't move, though. He began with 2 artists whose public names were almost impossible to damage. They were legendary in their own way, known for their hit songs and charisma on stage. Fans saw them as heroes. Bill had to deal with them all the time. The first was a talent who was charming on stage but sneaky behind the scenes. Bill remembered times when this artist would change the set list quietly minutes before the show, making room for less well-known acts or even Bill himself. He said that this person had stolen song ideas from up-and-coming writers and passed on, said them off as their own more than once. When the second name was called, the stress in the room rose. Bill said that this person's ego was so big that it was almost like a character in and of itself. They wanted their own lighting, wouldn't share a dressing room, and didn't care about other artists being there. Bill talked about a time in the late 1960s when that ego got in the way of his patience. A small argument about who would end the show turned into a heated argument that stagehands at the Opry had to step in to keep it from spilling onto the stage in front of the crowd. Bill, who is always the expert, kept his temper in check in public. In private, though, the memory hurt a lot. That night, those 2 names were firmly printed in his mind as people he shouldn't talk to. The Grand Ole Opry was a magical place for the fans who were there. There were both famous artists and up-and-coming ones on the same stage, and custom was respected. The spirit of country music felt like it would last forever. But Bill Anderson knew the truth. Behind the Opry's bright lights on Saturday nights was a darker, dirtier place. He learned early on in his work that smiles could practice just as much as songs, and that friendships could change with the touch of a pen on a lineup sheet. Bill told them that one of the 8 people on his list was hated not because they were mean to him personally, but because they were so cruel with their power. This artist held the keys, and they loved having power. They had a lot of power over producers and managers. They could even choose which new performers would be welcomed into the Opry and which would be quietly shut out. Bill had a personal experience with this. In the beginning of his show on the Opry, he was set to appear at a very popular time, prime time, when millions of people would be listening on the radio. On the night of the show, just minutes before going on, he was told that his part had been cut to make room for an Opry veteran who suddenly wanted to sing an extra song. He had been training for weeks. With all of that veteran's charm in front of the fans, he often ruined other people's chances, and Bill will never forget how painful it was to leave the stage without playing a note. He talked about other young artists whose dreams were dashed in the same way. While practicing backstage, they were told right before the show that they had to leave early. Bill said it was the worst part knowing that people would never see this side of the Opry. They thought the veteran was a great star. People who worked behind the scenes saw them every day and knew that ability alone wasn't enough to make it at the Opry. It was about staying alive in a world where politics were important and friendships weren't always important. That name was on Bill's list not because it had betrayed him once, but because it had wasted years of other artists' chances in order to get their own attention. Bill Anderson has always been known for being able to handle stress well. He had been on long trips, had ad reviews, and had to deal with the chaos of live TV. But nothing had prepared him for how painful it was to be made fun of on purpose in front of a big crowd at the Grand Ole Opry. It took place on a night that should have been one of his best. The air was thick with excitement and the house was packed. Bill was set to sing a heartfelt song that he knew would get everyone on their feet. But hiding behind the scenes was another Opry act. Bill still doesn't fully understand why, but one of the most beloved comedy artists in country music seemed determined to bring him down a peg. Trouble began a short time before Bill left. As they leaned over the control board and laughed under their breath, this artist said something to the sound engineer in a whisper. At first, Bill didn't think much of it. Backstage, pranks were popular and usually didn't hurt anyone. But there was something wrong as he walked out into the spotlight and the first sounds of his song played. The music grew beautiful, but his voice was hard to hear because of the band. People in the crowd moved around in their places, looking like they were trying to understand better, some of them craning their necks. Bill, always the professional, kept going, trying hard to project, but it became more and more clear. The sound on his microphone had been turned down almost all the way. By the end of the first line, there were whispers in the crowd, and Bill could feel his cheeks getting red with shame. When he approached the sound crew after the show, they felt bad and told him the truth. It wasn't a mistake. They did it for laughs because of that prankster who said Bill needed to be more humble. For them, it was just fun. For Bill, it was a public attack on his job and his pride. He had worked hard for years to build a reputation for professionalism, but one small move made people doubt him. He told the story many years later, but there was no smile or laugh when he talked about it. He just gave the man a sharp shake of the head and said that from that night on, the so-called funny man's name would always be on his list. Fans may have loved the Joker, but Bill would never forget how they tried to make fun of him on purpose. Some of the names on Bill Anderson's list came about because of ego fights or small-time drama behind the scenes, but one stood out for a very different reason. There was so much damage to the friendship that Bill would take it with him forever. It wasn't just another old friend from the Opry or a talent he shared the stage with sometimes. Bill had thought of this person as a brother. In the hard times, they went on tours across the country together, sharing small hotel rooms and splitting gas money. They worked on songs late into the night while passing a single guitar back and forth. They had been on the road through snowstorms together, gigs in dance halls that were only half full, and the thrill of their first big crowd at the Opry. What happened next was even worse because of that past. Over the years, Bill's friend Quick, Lee, rose through the ranks in the business. His voice could be heard on the radio and seen on all the posters, but fame came with a far away. Bill saw that the calls were happening less often. The times when they wrote songs together, which used to be the best part of their weeks, were moved aside for bigger chances. At first, Bill thought it was just the stress of being famous, but then he heard stories behind the scenes that his old friend was stealing credit for songs they had written together in the motel rooms. Bill was shocked and angry when he learned that one of their first projects together, something they both put a lot of effort into, had been re-recorded and released without his name on it. The last break happened during a big Opry anniversary show. Bill was glad to see his friend again and hoped that they could laugh about the good old days. But when a reporter asked about their early work together, the man laughed and said it was just during the early days, as if it wasn't important. While Bill smiled for the cameras, he felt something break inside him. The deception wasn't just at work, it was very close to home. That night, the person he had trusted with his job and his friendship became another person who would always be on his list. Not because they were rivals, but because they wanted to break the tie they had together. Bill Anderson's list didn't have all the names of people who had hurt him seriously or over many years. One came from a single obvious fact that Bill could never ignore. There were people who didn't fit on the Grand Ole Opry stage. The music this singer made was a crossover act, a star that was brought in when the Opry tried to update its look and attract younger people. It made sense on paper. They were famous and sold out stadiums and topped the charts in many different types of music. But Bill thought that the way they treated the Opry was an insult to everything it stood for. Right away, it was clear that they didn't see the Opry as holy ground. Instead, they saw it as just another stop on their tour to promote themselves. They were often late to practices or didn't show up at all. Tradition didn't mean anything. There was no greeting with the house band, no thanks for the legends who came before, and no honor for the host who presented them. Bill remembered one night when the act showed up almost 40 minutes late with twice as many people with them as the Opry staff that was on duty. Other performers were nervously waiting backstage, polishing their guitars or practicing their lines. This stranger, on the other hand, was looking through their phone and barely looked up when they were talked to. They cut their set short by 2 songs when they finally got on stage, not caring about the people in the crowd and waving at them as if they were there to help them. Bill felt sick to his stomach as he stood in the wings. The Opry was more than just a place to see country music. It was a live, breathing piece of history. Every piece of that stage, every rythme, and every plank held the hopes of many artists. And this person was acting like it was just a casual job they could walk in and out of without any problems. After the fact, Bill said that you don't have to love country music to be here, but you do need to accept it. The fact that this artist didn't know how to show respect was enough to get them on his list. Bill thought it was more than just the sounds. Someone from the outside had never even tried to understand what it was about to honor the Opry's very soul. Even though Bill Anderson had been singing at the Grand Ole Opry for decades, nothing could have prepared him for the humiliation he faced one night under the bright stage lights. It was meant to be a very special show. Bill was given a great spot in the middle of the evening show to sing a soft song he had written years before, the kind of music that didn't just make people laugh but also made them think. The introduction went well. As soon as the first chords hit, Bill's voice filled the room with that familiar smooth calm. After that, it happened out of the blue. Another famous, loud, and notoriously needy Opry artist walked onto the stage.